Hi everyone, I'm here with Kasha. Kasha, how are you doing?
Hi, Raghu. I'm doing very well. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. So you've written about conductive inks. In 10 seconds, what are conductive inks and what has been the biggest market for them historically?
Well, conductive inks are inks which are filled with a conductive filler, and they have the most diverse set of applications. You can find conductive inks in anything from a baby diaper all the way to a precision missile. So you can find them, you know, you would be surprised by the diversity of the applications in conductive inks. But in terms of the big applications, I think the industry really grew with the rise of the solar industry. And the solar industry has continued its tremendous growth. And I think we are now through maybe even 100 gigawatts per year installation. So the volumes are growing, but that is a very, very tough market, Raghu, because the margins are very low and the competitive advantages don't last very long. So many players are now seeking other markets. Niche nascent markets, even players who are very big with established capacities, and these players would have traditionally dismissed these small markets. They are also looking to cultivate the emerging markets.
So can you quantify the size of the market? There's more details in your report, but roughly how big is it that we're looking at, say, in 2019 for the entire conductive ink market?
Well, I think it's better to think in terms of tonnage because the price of raw
Mm.
silver changes and therefore the market value changes to some extent. But I think we are estimating something around 3,000 tons per year. Of course, the vast majority of that goes to solar cells because that's a huge volume market. Also, in this number, we are excluding some relatively substantial markets. For example, we are not counting membrane switches, or we are not counting a lot of the LTCC applications. But we are counting many other interesting and emerging applications.
Got it, right. So PV's big, the majority, everything else is fairly small. But so what's growing? Where are we really seeing new markets take off? What sort of applications in particular?
Well, there are many interesting emerging markets. I think one of the hot areas today is around die attach, and that has applications both in electric vehicles and power electronics, and also in power amplifiers for 5G. So if you think about 5G power amplifiers, when we transition from LTE or 4G to sub 6 gigahertz 5G, there would be a change in the semiconductor technology, going from LDMOS to gallium nitride. And the gallium nitrides would be mainly used in the infrastructure side, so the microstation, macro stations. And again, there is a transition taking place at the level of the semiconductor, and also there could be a transition taking place at the level of the die attach, going from the traditional gold tin eutectic bonding, let's say, to pressureless silver sintering. So that's a very interesting market. Another aspect of die attach is, of course, in power electronics for electric vehicles and renewables. But if you look at power electronics for electric vehicles, the technology was adopted by one of the leading players, by one of the most well-known players for the main power converter. And now many players are trying to bring this technology. And really, what the drivers here are that the power densities are going up. As we adopt more silicon carbide or gallium
Yeah.
nitride content, the power densities go up, and so more people will need it. So that's die attached, but we have many other applications. We've had in-mold electronics or stretchable electronics, e-textiles, package level conformal packaging, and yeah, so the list goes on and on. Skin patches are a very interesting trend these days.
So I could stop you there. So there's lots of opportunities. How, as a supplier of conductive inks, do you focus and prioritize? What do you think companies do in the supply chain, given they could be doing so many things, but you've got to start somewhere?
Yeah. It's quite challenging actually, because as you point out, there is a risk of opportunity over those, and each market has its own dynamics and its own characteristics. And I think, first of all, they have to really build a deep insight about the market dynamics. And I think in many of the markets, a first mover advantage tends to be key, at least for some time, until the market tends to become commoditized. And so it is very important to move in early. I think the companies who have the ability to customize their solutions, they have the resources to customize their solutions for a specific application, are better placed. Of course, many have a platform technology that they want to sell into many segments, but the ability to work closely with the customers in the early stages and develop something specifically catering to those requirements, I think is key.
Yeah.
And just keeping
So
an eye out. Yeah.
So I guess another one is most of the market is for silver. That's
Yeah.
very mature. But copper ink has been talked about for probably 2 decades now.
Yeah.
What are your views on that? What's holding it back, and do you see it taking off? And what would be the drivers for it?
Well, a number of things have traditionally held copper back. One is the need to prevent oxidization during curing, which has typically meant that one needs a novel or a different curing mechanism, be it photosintering, be it some other technology, and that has meant that the copper wasn't a drop-in replacement because you had to change your machinery and then go through the learning curve, and that has slowed down the market adoption to some extent. Another key challenge has been that many of the copper inks traditionally on the market had a lower conductivity than the silver ones, meaning that yes, they were cheaper on a dollar per kg basis, but if you thought in terms of conductivity that they delivered, you would have to print a little bit more, and so that price advantage was not as big. But I think things are beginning to change, and there are some really interesting propositions out there now offering fairly high conductivity with very, very rapid sintering approaches. And so I think, again, after 20 decades, there are still innovative approaches being brought to the market, and some of them promise to resolve, the long-standing issues with the technology.
Got it. So I think you got a slide, if you don't mind showing, which shows some of the applications and the takeoff in the market over the coming years. And IDTechEx has a report on this topic. We've been looking at conductive inks for many years, and I think truly we've got the best data on this, and Kasia leads our research. So do take a look at our website for more information. So roughly there's looks pretty considerable market growth. Is that all coming from some of the new applications that you've been discussing, Kasia?
Yeah, so I believe that you can see, if you look on the right-hand side of this figure, you can see that there are many, many markets. So that tells you that our report and our research is very, very well segmented. And of course, this report, this particular market chart excludes solar cells. Just because if we put solar cells here, you wouldn't be able to see all the other markets. So
Right.
there is a lot of growth. And I think, generally speaking, automotive is emerging as a very, very interesting target market for conductive ink suppliers. The content in terms of electric powertrains and the die attach that we spoke about. I think there is a lot of opportunity in heating applications, both for seat heating and also for window heating and defrosting. And the technology even for the defrosting is beginning to change a little bit, and we might see more transparent, efficient heating solutions on the market. And then many other sensors are integrated into the interior of the car. And so I think, in generally speaking, automotive is becoming a very, very interesting application. And when you think about other markets like in-mold electronics, the target market often is in the automotive sector. So they're developing products targeting the automotive sector. So.
Yeah. And so here we are, sitting in our houses. You're on your balcony because, of course, of the COVID-19 situation. So, how do you think that impacts this? I mean, in traditional markets, there may be some impact as you naturally expect, but other opportunities for conductive ink arising from all of this, for example, in things like diagnostic sensors. Do you see any sort of interest there?
Yeah, I mean, I've read announcements that conductive inks have been used in some of the point-of-care COVID diagnostics test devices already. So there is an immediate impact there, a positive impact. I think when we think about the negative impact, it's hard to predict at this stage what will happen. The question is, for example, when we talk about the automotive industry or when we talk about 5G, I think the real question is, will the downturn really slow down the adoption, and will it really slow down the capital investment that is sometimes needed to drive these markets forward? And I think that is an open question. But in terms of immediate opportunities, yes, I mean, as I said, we are seeing adoption even in some of the test devices. And COVID, testing for COVID is going to be a huge market for years to come. Even if this particular pandemic goes, I think people will try and maintain a very large testing capacity in order to be ready for the future.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kasia. So just to summarize on the report you've done on conductive inks, how many application areas did you look at, and roughly how many companies are covered in that report?
Oh, I don't know the statistics. I would guess that maybe more than 30 market segments. And how many companies? I think, Raghu, we've been doing this research for 7 or 8 years now. And in that time, I believe we've spoken with everybody. We've run many projects. We've traveled the world. We've gone to all the major shows in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Japan, in Taiwan, and elsewhere. And so I think, I would guess that we have spoken to 150 or 200 companies over the years, both suppliers and end users, and also people in the ecosystem, in the general ecosystem. And some of our colleagues actually were in this industry, and they were part of some of the biggest companies in this field, and they were very much active actually in creating the market for conductive paste in solar cells. So I think in terms of the strength of our research, I think we are really unrivaled.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kasha. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.